Christianity. Jesus Christ, known as the Son of God by Christians, is the founder of Christianity. Jesus was born to the Virgin Mary between the years of 4 and 6 BC in the town of Bethlehem. He spent most of his years in Nazareth until the age of 30, when he started to travel and impart his lessons. Jesus didn't travel alone, as he picked 12 disciples to accompany him. Of those disciples, 2 of them, who were known as Matthew and John, wrote parts of the Bible, which is the holy book of Christianity. Along with the 12 disciples, thousands of men and women flocked to Jesus. Many were enamored by Jesus' various miracles, such as raising people from the dead, healing the blind, curing leprosy, and feeding thousands of people from one single meal. Jesus did all of this while spreading the gospel. However, his popularity would also attract unwanted attention, and Jesus would eventually be targeted by the Romans and betrayed by the Jews. This led to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and his death. After he was entombed, his body mysteriously went missing. 3 days later, Jesus rose from the dead and appeared in front of his followers and disciples. He eventually traveled to the top of the Mount of Olives and rose to heaven. Islam. Islam traces its roots to the Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad entered the world approximately in the year 570 AD within the city of Mecca, and he was part of the tribe known as Quraysh, which held great power in the city. During the era of Muhammad, Mecca's inhabitants mostly worshipped multiple gods from pagan beliefs. In contrast, Muhammad and his relatives were believers in Allah, their one God. Muhammad was employed in trade when he was young. By the time he turned 40, he began experiencing visions and hearing voices. In search of answers, he retreated into a cave in Mount Hira for some deep thinking. It was there that, according to him, the Archangel Gabriel came to him with messages that would lay down the basis for the Quran. Gradually, Muhammad attracted a circle of followers convinced by his teachings. However, not everyone in Mecca welcomed these new ideas. Many feared it threatened their traditional beliefs and livelihood. For a while, his uncle, who led their tribe, shielded him from those against him. But after his uncle passed away, resistance grew stronger against Muhammad and those who followed him. Eventually, finding themselves cornered in Mecca, the Prophet and his believers headed to Medina. It's here that he continued receiving his claimed divine messages and saw an increase in followers. He eventually came back to Mecca with his army and converted most of the Meccans to Islam. He eventually passed away in the city of Medina. Judaism. Abraham is recognized by the Jewish people as the first Jewish person and the originator of their faith, Judaism. They hold their belief that their lineage traces back to Abraham via his son Isaac and subsequently through his grandson Jacob. Abraham lived in the city of Ur within Babylonia during the Bronze Age. He lived alongside his father, Terah, a merchant who earned income through selling idols. Despite this, Abraham believed there was only one God. Abraham received a call from God one day to depart for Canaan, the land promised to his future generations by God. With his spouse and nephew accompanying him, he accepted what God proposed and they began their travel. When Abraham accepted to leave his family in the city of Ur, God gave Abraham a son to carry on his lineage, which was a miracle given that his wife Sarah was 90 years old. Abraham was buried in the cave of Machpelah. Hinduism. Hinduism came into existence around 2300 to 1500 BC. Hinduism does not have a single founder. Rather, the religion began with the mixing of various beliefs. When people from the Indo-Aryan group moved to where we now call Pakistan, near the Indus Valley, their ways and traditions mixed with those of the local people. From this mixture grew what is known today as Hinduism. In Hindu mythology, Manu was the very first human being created by God. Lord Brahma used his powers to make goddess Shatarupa, and from the union of Brahma and Shatarupa, Manu came into being. Manu, after a prolonged period of self-discipline, received his wife Ananti. All other humans descended from Manu and Ananti. Additionally, Manu is recognized as the creator of old Sanskrit legal text, known as the Manu Smriti. This text represents a condensed version of the advice that Manu shared with various sages. Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama, or the Buddha, is responsible for starting Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama was born into the royalty of an old kingdom that was located on the border of India and Nepal, around the 6th century BC. At 29 years old, his perspective on life transformed after seeing something called the four sights. Siddhartha observed an old man, then a man who was ill, next the corpse of someone deceased, and finally a person practicing asceticism. Upon observing this, he realized that each person, regardless of their position in society, will grow old, fall ill, and ultimately pass away. Siddhartha desired to do away with worldly possessions, but he knew that his family would not agree with him. As he returned to his luxurious home, one night after observing all his belongings, he realized that a life leading only to loss and pain was not something he could accept. He then departed from the royal residence. He dedicated his time to studying with various spiritual teachers and adopted a disciplined ascetic life. While sitting beneath a Bodhi tree, he deeply considered the past, present, future, and the four sights. As time went on, he came to understand that there was a method for individuals to stop their suffering and sorrow. In this instant, he gained wisdom and enlightenment. From here, he started to share his enlightenment journey with people. They named him the Buddha because it means the enlightened one. Sikhism. Guru Nanak established the Sikh faith. It has 10 spiritual leaders, and Guru Nanak Dev Ji is recognized as the first one among those 10 gurus. Guru Nanak, born in the year 1496, had a great curiosity for understanding different religions. He was known for talking to both Hindu and Muslim teachers. He went to the river for a bath one day and claimed that he heard God's voice. Convinced that God had chosen him for a holy task, he began to spread the teachings of Sikhi to all people. Guru Nanak spent the next 30 years traveling across Asia teaching Sikhi. He covered a distance of almost 20,000 miles on these travels. He instructed individuals that it was unnecessary to have a priest or a special ceremony for communicating with God, promoting the same status for everyone and repeatedly expressing opposition to any form of social ranking. Before passing away in 1593, he made Guru Angad Dev Ji the succeeding leader of the Sikh religion. Taoism. Taoism is about finding peace and balance inside yourself and encourages being kind and living in harmony. The main book of Taoism, called the Tao Te Ching, or The Way and Its Power, is full of poems and sayings that have been around since 300 BC. The philosopher Laozi was responsible for writing this book, but there is much debate as to whether Laozi existed in the first place at all. Laozi came from a small village in what's now the eastern part of Hunan province in China. He was a special scholar known as a Shi in the royal courts of the Zhou dynasty. These were scholars specializing in divination, sacred texts, and astrology. Adding to his mystique are the various legends surrounding him. He was born after being in his mother's womb for 72 years, and when he was young, he met the famous thinker Confucius. Different people in China revere him for different reasons. Some regard him as a wise philosopher, others as a saint or even a god, especially those who follow Taoism. Bahai faith. The Bahai faith is the belief in the unity of God, humanity, and all religions. Baha'u'llah is the founder of the Bahai faith. Baha'u'llah had another name, Mirza Hussain, and he belonged to the Shiite sect of Islam. He then joined forces with Mirza Ali Muhammad from Shiraz, referred to as the Bab. Bab was the leader of the Babi community, a group of Muslims claiming special insights into the ultimate truth. His time as a leader would come to an end as he was executed. His execution caused outrage among his supporters, leading them to protest and form large groups. This resulted in the deaths of many thousands who followed Bab's teachings. Baha'u'llah was captured in this event and was put inside a prison cell in Tehran. It was at this moment during his imprisonment that he claimed to be the new messenger from God, the very same messenger that Bab had predicted would arrive. This resulted in factional violence, to the point where the Ottoman government exiled Baha'u'llah to Acre. It was in Acre that the name Baha'u'llah was given to him, and there he expanded what used to be a local Baha'i belief into a wide-ranging set of teachings. These teachings called for all religions to unite and for every person in the world to see each other as brothers. He focused on how people should behave in society while turning away from formal religious ceremonies. His work aimed at ending differences between races, social classes, and religious groups. Jainism. The founder of Jainism was the philosopher Mahavira. Mahavira came into the world around 599 BCE, but many people believe that he existed during the same period as Buddha. Mahavira was from a family of warriors. However, by the time he reached 30 years of age, he gave up his life to follow very strict self-discipline practices. In other words, he took part in extreme asceticism. He owned nothing, not even simple clothes to wear, or a bowl for collecting charity and sustenance. He spent 12 years in this state, after which he achieved Kevela, the ultimate level of understanding. He was a supporter of vegetarianism and maintained a vow of non-violence. He revitalized Jain teachings and set up guidelines for the community of monks. Followers promised to not cause harm, avoid false speech and theft, maintain sexual purity, and give up ownership of everything. Shinto. The founding of Shinto is not credited to a single person. There are no sacred books that are strictly followed, and there aren't any unchanging teachings, but its main ideas have been maintained over time. There is still a lot we do not know about the religious practices in Japan from the Paleolithic and the Neolithic periods, but it seems that these early forms of religion probably do not have a clear link to Shinto. Although the practices existed beforehand, the name Shinto only came into being in the 6th century. This was to distinguish the local spiritual practices from Buddhism and Confucianism that came from China. Soon after, Buddhism became more popular than Shinto, and people often saw gods of Shinto as forms of Buddha before he existed in his current form. Buddhist monks took care of the Shinto shrines, adding their decorations, figures, and ceremonies. Around the late 700s to early 800s, a renowned Japanese instructor named Kobodaishi created a belief system that brought together Buddhism and Shinto called Ryobo Shinto. In the recent faith system, Buddhism became more influential than Shinto and took parts from Confucian teachings. The old way of following Shinto almost vanished, surviving mainly at some important temples and within the emperor's residence, even though the emperors had converted to Buddhism. Confucianism. From 200 BC until 1949, Confucianism was the main belief system in China. This changed with the rise of communism, which clashed with religious practices. Confucius, the creator of Confucianism, emphasized self-control, honoring traditions and social order, and kindness to all. Living from 551 to 479 BC in Lu, which is now part of Shandong province in China, Confucius was a thinker and educator deeply influenced by his homeland's connection to the Zhao dynasty's cultural and moral standards. Despite his noble ancestry, Confucius grew up poor. After his father passed away when he was 3, raised primarily by his mother, he became a passionate student as a teenager, diving into subjects like music, math, classic texts, history, and beyond. For Confucius, education and thinking carefully about one's actions were key to becoming a good person. He believed that to lead others well, one needed to first develop strong moral character and discipline within oneself. His direct pursuit for change and reform within the government met resistance, and at one point he was considered a minister of crime in the city of Lu. However, eventually this title against him was dropped due to many around him agreeing with his bold push for improvement. Following his death, Confucius's followers gathered his teachings on ethics and moral conduct into several texts, with the Lunyu being the most noted. These teachings continue to influence many people's views on right behavior and ethical leadership today. Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism was founded by Zoroaster, the Iranian prophet. The exact time when Zoroaster was alive is not known for sure. Some people believe that he lived around 6000 BC. Others maintain that he lived in the middle of the 7th century BC. Zoroaster came into the world in Iran's western side, around the Azerbaijan area. His ancestry was straight from the royal family of the Menushiar house, who were the old kings of Iran. At 16 years old, Zoroaster became disinterested in worldly things which no longer appealed to him. He despised all mundane pleasures, rising above all sensual cravings. Zoroaster went through a deep connection with Ahura Mazda, who is the highest ruler of everything when he was on Mount Sabatam. During this communion, he saw visions of the future. Zoroaster would teach others that Ahura Mazda was at the heart of a realm where justice ruled and it offered eternal life and happiness. He spoke directly to Ahura Mazda and was given the Lord's wisdom. From Ahura Mazda, he received 7 revelations. When he was 30 years old, he declared himself God's prophet. Having been given the holy light of revelation, he turned into a famous messenger for Ahura Mazda.